Hello my friends, my name is Paul and welcome back to A Calm Touch of Fantasy. A little bit late on this one. This is the BookTube Babbles favorite fantasy. Today I am talking about my favorite series of all time, and that is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Now, I know that some people on BookTube don't really like The Wheel of Time, and that's okay, but these are the books that I grew up with, my age range. These are the books that really stood out to me when I was reading fantasy when I was a teenager. I started to read Wheel of Time around 1996 or so. I was probably about 15 or 16 years old when I picked up The Eye of the World. Before this, I read a lot of R.A. Salvatore and I read a lot of Dragonlance books, and I wanted something that was more mature fantasy, something that would expand the type of books that I started to read that was really heavily based on D&D. So I found The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and I fell in love with it immediately because it was something more complicated and more fun than anything I've read up to that point. And it's important to realize that when The Eye of the World came out in 1990 and the other books came out soon after, all the way up until maybe A Crown of Swords, maybe around 1996, 1997, that Tor just started to be a company, and Wheel of Time was their big series, and they marketed it so much, and it was everywhere. If you went to a bookstore, you would always see Wheel of Time books, and they were extremely popular. As popular as Brandon Sanderson, his books are today, or Patrick Rothfuss. They were that popular back in the 90s. And so I got on the train, and I absolutely loved it. Wheel of Time, starting with The Eye of the World, you know, it is kind of tropey, but at that time, that's what fantasy was all about. It was all about having humble beginnings that led you into adventure, that led you into notoriety, and to become more than what you started. And that's why people loved this type of fantasy, because honestly, the people that read these books back then, most of the fantasy readers back then were dorks like me that, you know, got picked on at school, had hard times, and reading about a normal farm boy that ended up being the main hero and the one that's prophesied made us feel good. It made us feel like, you know, we could do anything, that we have power in ourselves as well. And so, you know, right away, I really connected with Rand, Matt, Perrin, these three friends, being best friends growing up and just having a lot of fun together. I connected instantly to them. Nineveh, I'm probably going to say a lot of these wrong because I learned to say these wrong growing up. Egwene, and later on we have Moraine and Mandragoran, and then Elaine was added, and then Min and Fail, and I loved all these characters. I thought they were very interesting, different, diverse characters. I see a lot of people talk about the women in this book, how they're all really bossy, and that not all women are like that. I think that that is a representation of Randland, which people call the world that Wheel of Time is in. I think that's a good representation of how women think they should be related to, because they were in positions of power. When you are the top people in kingdoms, when you are the most powerful people in the world, they demand a certain amount of respect. And so then you have this farm boy coming out of nowhere, and he's challenging all that. And of course they're trying to control him. Of course they're trying to be a little bossy and a little bit stuck up at times. And I think it's perfectly logical for the women in this world to act this way. And even though I think it is a legitimate concern by a lot of readers, that I think that I think that I actually enjoy that aspect because it's a different culture than the culture that we live in, and I like that more matriarchal society, and it causes a lot of conflicts in the books that I love. So nostalgia factor, the Eye of the World, The Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn, love them. I just look to them as the best books of the series because I've probably read these three books maybe 4 times each one, and I just love these books. And then Shadow Rising and The Fires of Heaven, it takes the story in a whole different direction, and it's just fantastic. And we have all these antagonists that I absolutely love. If it wasn't for the bad guys in this series and Hall ridiculously overpowered and charismatic, and I guess you would call them a little bit tropey with, they're all dressed in black and they're like destroying things and things like that. I love that. I think it's just a lot of fun to have a bad guy that knows he's bad, that dresses in black, and that's evil. There's nothing wrong with that, and I absolutely love it. Um, the Forsaken are, for me, the highlight of the entire series, and I love them so much. Uh, and so, like, Shadow Rising, Fires of Heaven, Lords of Chaos, all 4-star books in my opinion. I absolutely love these books. Crown of Swords was a highlight for me in the middle of this series. I love Crown of Swords. I thought the characters started to become more mature, became more self-involved, became more self-aware, and they're just doing things that I didn't see them doing in the past. And as these characters grow up, it's fantastic to see them actually have positions of power, and I found that to be outstanding. Yes, around the Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, and especially Crosswords of Twilight, the series does slow down quite a bit. They aren't bad books, but the quality is definitely a lot lower than the previous 6 or 7 books. Then we get into Knife of Dreams, which is the last Robert Jordan book before his passing away. I found that to be a great book that really got the series back on track, and that was fantastic. Brandon Sanderson then took over and finished the series out with 3 books that I think are just as good as Jordan's, and really wraps things up so well. This entire series, why I like it is just it's so epic in scope. There's so much world building. Every person you meet has a backstory. Every town you go to is different culturally, and everyone has their own opinion, and it is just fantastic. It is, as a whole, it is geopolitics in a fantasy series that is beyond anything I've read so far, and I love that about it. And I thought Sanderson really ended the story great. A Memory of Light is probably up there in my top 10 favorite books, and I think it really wrapped everything up, and the last battle was absolutely epic, and I was so happy that it ended the way it did, and what happened happened. I think that if you want to try a huge fantasy series that's going to take you a very long time to read, I think Wheel of Time is a perfectly reasonable series to give a try. Yes, it's a little dated. A lot of the language isn't as modern as it is today. Yes, there are a lot of descriptions of clothing, and yes, there is a lot of things that are repeated as far as like braid tugging and lifting eyebrows and blushing and stuff like that. But I mean, how many fantasy books out there don't do that? Most of them do. So I love this series. If you want to try it sometime, I would recommend it. You don't have to continue with it if you don't like it, but try the first 3 books and see what you think. If you hate it, then you can just kind of mark it off your list. If you love the first 3 books and you want to continue, it's fantastic. And yes, there's a slowdown in the middle, but it's still fantastic as a whole. When I think of Wheel of Time, I think of it as a whole and not individual books. And I think it tells a sweeping story unlike any other fantasy series that I've ever read. And that is why it is my favorite series. Thanks for watching. If you guys have read this series, let me know what you thought of it. If you've tried this series and don't like it, what did you not like about it? A lot of people either love this series or hate this series. And I think it has a lot to do with age. I think that a lot of the older fantasy readers really love the Wheel of Time, while the younger readers that have grown up now with Brandon Sanderson, have grown up with Robin Hobb a little bit, have grown up with Patrick Rothfuss, have grown up with Scott Lynch, Joe Abercrombie, people like that. I think that maybe I can see their reasoning about how this is just so slow and redundant at times, but I think it's epic in scope, and I think it's worth checking out. All right, thanks, guys.